Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we tackle a single relevant question based on our Bible reading for that day. This week our reading is centered around the book of James, and today I'm joined by Alyssa Bream and Chris Rexroad. We're going to dive into a question from our reading in James, which was James chapter 2, verses 5 through 13. And he says, "Listen to me, dear brothers and sisters. Hasn't God chosen the poor in this world to be rich in faith? Aren't they the ones who will inherit the kingdom he promised to those who love him? But you dishonor the poor. Isn't it the rich who oppress you and drag you into court? Aren't they the ones who slander Jesus Christ, whose noble name you bear? Yes, indeed. It is good when you obey the royal laws found in scriptures, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you favor some people over others, you are committing a sin. You are guilty of breaking the law. For a person who keeps all the laws except one is as guilty as a person who has broken all the laws. For the same God who said, 'You must not commit adultery,' also said, 'You must not murder.' So if you murder someone but do not commit adultery, you have still broken the law. So whatever you say or do, remember that you will be judged by the law that sets you free. There will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy to others. But if you have been merciful, God will be merciful when he judges you." So the last two verses there are kind of where I want to drill in. He says, "So whatever you say and whatever you do, remember that you will be judged by the law that sets you free. There will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy, but if you have been merciful, God will be merciful when he judges you." What does it mean here that if you haven't shown mercy, God will not give you mercy? What does he mean?
I think it's a direct reflection of your relationship with God and understanding what he's done for you. And it's one of these two expectations as far as forgiveness and mercy, that since he's poured it out onto you, he expects you to pour it back out onto other people. And if you're going to withhold it, then obviously you don't either understand or you don't have the right heart that he's wanting you to have with other people.
I think how we deal with people on earth in a lot of ways is how God will deal with us in eternity. I mean, it is a fairly straightforward statement, but how that would get implemented is in eternity is kind of perplexing.
When I read it, to me, it seems like pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
When you study it, like everybody starts trying to find other ways to interpret it, because the part of what we believe, a big part of what we believe, is that we're saved through Jesus and Jesus only. And it has nothing to do with what we've done or what we do, right? But especially in James, because he's talking about faith and works a lot, there is a correlation between how we live and what happens when we stand before God in judgment. Mm-hmm. And, some commentators would say that the person who doesn't show mercy is an unrepentant person. And whenever I read those comments, I always think that's a cop-out, mm-hmm. right? When they say people are when they talk about things like eternal security, and then they get to a verse where it talks about no more forgiveness of sins, or they've been turned over to a reprobate mind. What they respond by saying is this person couldn't have been repentant. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a mischaracterization of Scripture. I would agree with Alyssa. This is a pretty straightforward answer. Mm-hmm. Now, the question for me becomes more of and I would get this wrong if I said it, which judgment there's multiple judgments in eternity. There's one judgment, kind of a wheat tares, you're in, you're out judgment. As a matter of fact, I kind of think that judgment happens at death. That's my opinion. I think when we die, immediately, you're either with the Lord or you're not. Mm-hmm. But there's also other judgments. One of the judgments is a rewards, based on how you live. What did you do? It's kind of a stewardship. Rick Warren says the Bible kind of has two themes: salvation and stewardship. This is what you've been given. What did you do with it? You know, and what I read here, and the way I would interpret it is, this is not necessarily about salvation, heaven or hell. I'm not sure that I would go that far, but I do think it does have some impact on eternity. The rewards we receive, the place we're, in the new heaven and new earth, our assignment, I think it has to do with that. I can't buy the fact that, okay, the person who's unmerciful is unrepentant.
But I mean, if we look at Matthew 6, and the way it pulls up is ESV, so it's going to sound a little different. For if you give others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. So, I mean, I think that James here is probably pulling from that idea. And
in that passage there, that's directly related to prayer, because at the end of it, he says, if you don't forgive, I'm not going to hear what you've got to say.
And I think if we truly have accepted the grace that God has given us, it will give us the grace to be more understanding for others in our life. And I think that that's part of this, is that if you truly have accepted and understand your own, this is a good Calvinist word, depravity, and then when other people do things, you can grant them some grace because you see just how far in life you've come.
Like I said before, I think a lot of it is a heart check, and kind of going off of what Alyssa said there, something we should be learning through all this. What he's done for us is the compassion that he's poured out onto us, and that's an expectation for us to have compassion on other people.
What causes people not to be merciful?
Bitterness, pride, resentment.
Sometimes in my own life, there's been like a sense of justice when people do something wrong and they don't get maybe what they deserve, that I feel like there needs to be justice. And that can kind of cause unpleasant feelings.
And hurt. I guess when you're hurt by somebody. Going back to one of our other questions as far as dealing with anger, I mean, I think hurt would cause you to not want to hand that out.
That is my experience more than anything else. As harsh as I can be, I'm a fairly merciful person, I think. I give people a lot of leeway. But in my experience, the place, and this is difficult for me, because there are times when I'm leading through a situation that is extremely complicated, and the people that are, you talked about, people don't get what they deserve, or there should be some sense of justice. If you have been in a similar circumstance, it's very difficult for you somebody in a same situation of how you've been hurt. Let me give you a couple of examples where I've seen this play out. If you had a previous spouse or mate that was unfaithful to you, when you're face to face with that situation again, you're often unforgiving, because it's a trigger. It brings up all of the emotions that you had before. It could be discrimination or racism, if you have experienced that, so I have such a limited perspective on racism, because I'm a white male. I can try to relate, but there are people who have experienced it, who have dealt with it firsthand. And so certain things are triggers for them that well up in them. Another place where I've seen it is some type of sexual assault, where if there is very, very limited mercy for people who may commit that crime, because either they or somebody they love has had that experience and the trauma that they dealt with, because there are long lasting effects that come with some of these crimes. And so hurt, and I don't even think it is, I wouldn't go as far as to say unresolved hurt, because I think you can resolve the hurt and have a healthy life and then still have a trigger that, you're trying to work through. So that is the one place where I've seen, if you've been hurt in a specific area, it's very difficult for you to show mercy when somebody finds themselves in that same place. Now, if you were the one creating the hurt, you tend to have more mercy, sympathy for those people.
Mm-hmm. You think that's drawn from guilt?
No, I think you understand.
Okay.
That's what I would say. I think you understand what could lead to that. I think I think you have some understanding of how they got to that point. And so you go, okay, they may not be an evil person, whereas on the outside, when you see somebody do something, you think, oh, they're just an evil person.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example where I struggle. So, and I don't know that this is an unforgiveness thing as much as it is just a frustration. Not recently, I mentioned in a sermon that the three things, and I think this is true for everybody, but specifically for men, power, money, and sex are the things most likely to bring leaders down. And so I see that in the pastoral world. In the church world, we tend to deal with sexual failure rapidly and sometimes harshly, if we have the evidence of it. But money abuse in the church world, we ignore to great lengths. And the abuse of power, partly because it is so difficult to I don't know if the word is convict, but to prove like they're abusing their power, are completely ignored. And I think those two things ruin the church's reputation over a long period of time. And so I struggle when year after year after year, people go to great lengths to cover up for people's financial improprieties in the church or their abuse of power in the church. I struggle with it. That's a problem for me. Any place y'all struggle that you want to talk about, that you struggle to forgive or give mercy?
That's a good question. I would have to think about that one. I think that I tend to give grace for things that I struggle with when I see it in other people, and then the things that I've always done the right thing, when I see people messing that up, I'm like,
how could they do that?
Right. Why are you doing that? And so I think that's a common thing is when you struggle with it, you understand some of the complexities of it and you can give grace. And then when it's something that it isn't a struggle for you, then why are they messing it up?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I think that is the common practice for all of us.
I think lying and intentionally deceiving are ones that once that's happened, I have a hard time trusting that person again. I think I have a hard time. I know that I need to forgive them, but reestablishing trust is pretty hard for me.
Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue a conversation around the book of James.